anytime that a person is living outside of a value that communally we hold, they always are trying to overcompensate in some way, because the way that they're judged externally very much informs the way that they're judging themselves.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Second Opinion Podcast. I'm your host, Yossi Ben-Shushan, and today we are having our much-awaited guest, Dr. Samuel D. Mandelman. Dr. Mandelman is founder of the C.L.I.N.I.C. He's also a graduate of Yale, in case you need it. And if I were to go for more of his list, it just goes on and on and on. Dr. Mandelman is at the forefront of being able to destigmatize, change, and apply growth to our children and families. I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. Now, Dr. Mandelman.
Somewhere in this building, a kid's ear won't stop throbbing. Someone's throat is really sore. Someone can't get off the couch. You don't have to go anywhere. We come to you. Strep, flu, COVID, earaches, and more. Real care, right at home. Rite Care. At home, just a call away.
We are joined again by Dr. Mandelman for another amazing, insightful episode of the Second Opinion Podcast. Dr. Mandelman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me back.
It's been a while, but we're able to. I'm excited that we're able to do this again. I wanted to go into a lot of what it is that we discuss on this podcast, and that I have regularly going on in life, and as all of our guests do, is either that crisis or that extreme case, or a case that, hopefully is not that extreme yet, but it, has potential and it's caught in time and so on and so forth. But the average person, I could be wrong, but the average person that I see are, not that I see professionally, that I just see in the street, that I see in shul, they're just sort of dragging their feet through it. There's no simchas hayim, there's no joy to what it is that they're doing. And as the way we were raised, it's like, what are you complaining about that you don't have simchas hayim? Like, that's your biggest problem, that you don't have, that guy has this and that one has this. And we have this way of beating ourselves up for not being happy with what it is that we are supposed to be happy. And we put ourselves and our families into these spirals of just self-incriminating, just beating up on ourselves, this negative self-talk, this running dialogue of negativity, that even when things are going well, it seems like it's just never enough, or it's never well enough, and we're not feeling fulfilled. They're not enjoying their life.
So, and there are a lot of pieces, I think, to that question. So I'll take it, piece by piece. I think people are in a perpetual pursuit of something. What that is, you're terming it joy, you're terming it simchas hayim. People are searching on a constant basis, and you'll see that the movements that have the greatest traction are movements that are attracting people that they can hold on to something that gives them a sense of belonging, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. And human beings are programmed to want to have to belong. And really, when we're looking at it in general, what makes people feel fulfilled and what makes people happy, and how it is that people can achieve a level of their life being really with that level of richness that they're searching for, really comes down to people understanding what their values are and being able to live with a level of consistency within those values. And this is particularly true from obviously a hashkafic perspective, but outside of the hashkafic perspective, human beings need to be driven in directions based on beliefs, based on values. And when it is that people are living consistently with their stated values, people are happy. And when people are not able to live within their stated values and what it is that they truly appreciate and see that there's worthiness to, then they're not. And then we're on this perpetual search for we don't even know what. And we're always looking for something else. There's always this level of unsettledness, given the fact that we're in perpetual pursuit of something. And when we're talking about how do we just pump the brakes and really look at life from a different perspective, it really comes down to assessing how consistently am I living with my values? How much do the values that I have inform that which I am doing? How much is it that I, as a human being, are living in a way that is my actions, my behaviors, my thoughts are leading me towards that stated value? And what I think happens is that when people are preoccupied with doing everything else, the ability to really sit down and assess what are my values, what actually matters to me, what do I want to be as a human being, how do I want to be perceived, how do I want my children to be, how is it that I want my life to look, my home to reflect. It really comes down to a question of how well do I understand what my own values are and how consistently am I living with those values. And when a person's able to really dissect it and understand that their happiness is not going to come from an external source, nor is it going to come from drinking lemon juice and apple cider vinegar. What it's going to come down to is how consistently is it that I am living in line with the values that are going to define me. And part of that is this perpetual search that really comes down to the relationship between values and identity. And what gives somebody their identity, what gives somebody their sense of purpose, their mission, and what can potentially lead to fulfillment. And that, in my mind, really comes down to the values. And as from Jews, we have a very clearly articulated set of values. And oftentimes people will hold on to specific values as their hallmark trait. Well, in reality, it isn't quite as authentic and they're able to use it conveniently. But when people are happy, it are people that are living with that clarity in terms of what their values are, and if it is that they're in fact able to live in line with those values, then they will have that sense of fulfillment, that sense of happiness. When they are lacking that, they're unable to achieve truly that which they're looking for, and that's why they're perpetually looking for something else.
Mm-hmm. And, if I myself am not clear on a value, and instead I'm saying, this is what Hashem wants. I don't think it's right, but this is what Hashem wants. Is there going to be that same kind of friction? Or is it okay that I don't understand something? I can take that on as a value even though I don't understand it fully.
So I think what you're trying to ask is there room for the humanist just as an organic experience to exist when there isn't a level
Quite
of
literally what I wanted to say.
articulated clarity in terms of what the value
3 of those
is.
words I just learned now, but yeah.
And really, can a person exist and have that experience that we're all looking for without having fully understood or even articulated values? And I think part of, again, not to touch on Hashkafa or Halacha in any way, but I think part of what people forget is that you're humans and your projection of yourself in a particular way that is devoiding you of being a human because you believe in some way that is going to achieve your level of whatever it is in Ruchnius is dangerous. And we don't see that panning out well in terms of mental health. And oftentimes, obviously, this is not a conversation about mental health and halacha or ashkafa, but understanding human experience. And what your question to me was about was if we are going to look at this as a human, and how is it that I can align myself with a set of values that I don't necessarily truly understand or appreciate. And also, I think part of you mentioned in your initial formulation about this level of perfectionism, that, when we are believing that the only way to achieve whatever it is that we are achieving are in absolute terms, and we are operating within a paradigm that only is all or nothing, and there is no room for aspiration, there's no room for growth, but rather we are stuck in a very particular way in terms of how is it that my actions are in line or not in line with what I need to be doing. And instead of looking at this, how is this supposed to be transforming me as a human being? How is this supposed to make me feel? And I had a bacher in my office last week, emergency. They were concerned that, in fact, he was psychotic or manic. They weren't sure. I sat with the bacher, and he came in, obviously very agitated, didn't want to be there. After a few minutes, we started chatting, and he was really struggling with, he comes from a complex background, and, he was searching for this belonging and meaning, and he didn't know where to find it, and then he gravitated towards a certain group, and there was question as to why it was that group specifically that he was gravitating to, and he started telling me that, in that group, they were emphasizing the fact that every person is a chelik alakam imal, and that there is a level of significance and importance just to the fact that I'm a yid. And I looked at the guy. This is a Bismadish bacher. Isn't this Aleph base? Isn't this fundamental to the way we do everything? Isn't this a level of understanding that you would hope that everyone has? Because I've gone through the system and I never had sufficient level of understanding or appreciation of this. And now when I found it, I don't know where to put myself. So I walk into davening and I have this sense that here I am connecting with something greater, and I don't know if everybody else does. And basically, the behavioral deviation that initially triggered everybody's concern was how he was acting during davening, and his explanation of it is that here I have this new understanding, not because he was psychotic or manic, because things that he was previously unaware of were leading him to feel unsure as to how to navigate things, given that this was novel to him and others around him didn't necessarily see or appreciate the novelty of that. And again, that human belonging, the human experience, connecting to the values that are articulated very clearly, or in terms of the things that we attribute levels of importance to, are constantly sort of in that conflict. And really, when somebody is going to have that level of fulfillment is when that human experience and how it is that it's playing out is actually in line with those articulated values and goals. And that gives that somebody that sense of fulfillment, that sense of purpose, that level of shleimus that they're looking for. And I think we don't take enough time to actually assess where are we in terms of our own human experience and how it is that is impacting how we're doing everything in our life, and what level of introspection do we actually have? How mindful are we in that which we are doing? And are we able to take stock and really appreciate what it is that's going on and why we're doing it and how we're doing it, and whether our ability to connect that with that which we are doing is making the intended impact or not.
Is there, do you feel that there's a direct correlation between mindfulness, being mindful, mindfulness, working on mindfulness? Because, well, I'll get to that in a minute, but mindfulness and overall mood, mental health.
No question about it. Mindfulness has become a big fad recently, but actually, mindfulness, if we're looking within dialectical behavioral therapy, mindfulness is one of the primary premises of it. And I think people look at it in an odd way because it sounds like this hocus pocus. All it has to be is, are you able to connect to yourself without becoming distracted by everything else that's going on around you? And the modality and how it is that it arrives at that obviously depends on what speaks to that person, but it's really about, can you in fact be sufficiently present, and can you be connecting to yourself? And when somebody is mindful and someone is in fact capable of monitoring themselves and their own reactions, their own responses, and how it is that they're feeling, obviously they're going to be able to feel much more grounded and settled. And I think people don't necessarily have the understanding or skill in terms of that. And then it really leads down to, besides mindfulness, the level of intentionality that people have in that which they do. And when somebody is doing something with levels of intentionality and awareness versus people doing it because they're just running through whatever emotions, right? And any experience, any human experience, and it doesn't have to be of major significance, but how are we taking that experience and how are we incorporating that? How are we processing it and understanding it? And are we giving it enough time and space to have the intended impact? Or given the fact that we're not able to give it that time and space, we always have to be running on to the next thing because that never had even at a time to settle within us in any way.
So to go back for a second to your original point of value and that boy who came to see you, was it that everyone else over there already understood Am Chelek Elokai, or they were embodying that and he was the odd one out? Or was it that he was the odd one out because he was saying that?
Obviously, in his perception of it, he was the odd one out, that he was the only one there that had that level of understanding or appreciation, to the extent that he described those who were surrounding him, especially as dead. Like he was the one that had the pivot. That's why it sounded of a manic nature with grandiosity mixed in there, but really in conversation, here was a kid that had a tremendous amount of trauma in his background, found something to connect to, gave him that sense of meaning and purpose, and then
we find that a lot. Do you think? Obviously, there's no complete thing over here or extreme answer, but is that something that feeling that I am that, or that confidence in it, or that self-confidence in it, or that understanding of my individuality in my values and my relationship with the creator, or whatever that be, is that more of a home thing or a schooling thing?
I think it's always that combination, right? We get those foundational pieces at home, and then they are furthered and reinforced in school.
Yeah.
And sometimes I was having a conversation with the Rashiva last night, and they were talking about their own child and what they were challenging in terms of what they were hearing, in terms of what made sense and what didn't make sense, because there was this level of incongruence between home and school, and which was leading to confusion and doubt. And part of it, and I don't think necessarily that this is considered enough, is really when people are making choices in terms of the educational institutions that they're sending their children to, is how well aligned are home and school. There's always a preoccupation with what the constituency is of it, but are you really going to be able to consistently reinforce those things in either direction, so you don't end up with a child who doesn't feel like they know where they're going, given the fact that there is an incongruence between those pieces.
Yeah, and I would extend it to a person within themselves in the shul they go to, and the things that they're a part of. A lot of times they want to daven in that specific, shul because, whatever, whoever, whatever. But you would feel a lot more comfortable davening in the other shul, and people that you are more comfortable around are davening over there. Then, be real about who you are. And
again, being real, I think, is something that also is a big factor in this. We lack a great sense of authenticity, and that lack of authenticity impacts how well we're able to connect with others, how well we're able to have real relationships, how well we're able to connect with even our loved ones. How authentic are we? How vulnerable are we able to be? How objective are we able to be? Given the fact that there is a great tendency to being highly self-protective and avoidant of anything that would be potentially uncomfortable, and that level of vulnerability is the only thing that really lends itself to the development of deep and meaningful relationships. And when somebody is authentic, and is part of that authenticity to them is that level of intellectual honesty, as well as them really understanding and appreciating that which they're doing with that level of intentionality, and then that being consistent with what the value system is, that is going to be that person who really has that menuchas nefesh, that inner calm, that they feel like they're living purposefully. They have clarity in terms of that which they're doing. They understand and appreciate whatever it is that's going on, and they're doing that through the lens of knowing that they are in fact who and what they are, and not having to delude themselves that they are anyone or anything else, because they can come to a level of self-acceptance, which is something that we avoid. And if people were able to be authentic and accept themselves, given the fact that they are in fact living in the way that they want to be, we would get much further in life.
So, I mean, for the average person, again, going through anything, the average, the average day, the average things in life, regular things that'll come up. I believe there's definitely for the average Jew, I would say, there's a certain fear of being happy, in a sense, where if you want to give a guy a heart attack in shul, like over to him and say, wow, your life looks amazing. Looks like you're doing great. We're like, you don't know the half of it. Everything's wrong. Don't worry about it. So, we have this like idea where we're also, in hand with that is that we're not allowed to believe in ourselves, in a sense that it's like, you're being a balgaiva. You're being a big shot. You're being like, oh, I'm all this and that. And obviously we all know in a cerebral sense that it's not true, that, healthy ego is great for a person to have. And like I try to tell people all the time, that saying I'm a nothing, or showing somebody that they're a nobody, or making them feel like a nobody, it doesn't make them, I've never seen it happen. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I've never seen anyone be, exposed, as they like to call it now. Like, he got exposed as, I've never seen someone have that happen, have everyone have them talk to him negatively and show him that he's really not all that. And then he's inspired to now become bigger or better. The only thing I believe that inspires is distraction, is them trying to, avoid the pain of it,
and
numb
and overcompensate
in some way they possibly
can.
Yeah. And then the other way, when someone feels like they're capable and good at something, they want to keep doing it. And they want to keep getting better at it.
Because that has that feedback loop that it reinforces that they are in fact competent and capable, and once it is that they feel they're competent and capable, they're going to continuously want to engage in that activity that gives them that sense.
So, to go back to the point of values, for us as religious Jews, I'm not saying you're like me, religious Jew. I'm saying one day I'll be like you.
For those who identify as such.
For those who identify as such. There's a lot of values. There's a lot, and there's a bunch of them, and they're all over. And what are these core values that if you could speak more to the values part, like what would a good example or a good representation of someone keeping to their values and not keeping to their values look like?
I'm going to turn the question on you.
Okay.
In your mind, when you're working with the people that you're working with, what do you feel they are lacking? What sense are they looking for that you in your work are able to guide them towards the discovery of?
Capability, confidence that they can walk through this, certainty that, well, not a certainty, but
Competency.
yeah, that would sum up all that. Yeah,
Competency.
Yeah,
And people want to feel competent because when they feel like they are competent in whatever it is that they're doing, they're able to feel that. And, going back to this balance between somebody's sense of them being competent versus somebody who is projecting themselves as something greater than everyone else or needing to put other people down. When there is that sense of competency and somebody has a level of comfort with that and they're able to embrace it instead of shy away from it, it allows that person just to have that inner base that I know who and what I am, I know what I'm capable of. I have no need to demonstrate that. I don't have a need to overcompensate for anything because I'm okay. And when we are feeling that we are in fact okay and that we are competent and we are capable and we are good and we are worthy, people live lives in far happier ways. And it's when we are doubting any of those things, and oftentimes they come from negative feedback along the way, a tremendous amount of self-doubt that afflicts people, which then causes them then to need to feel like they got to do something to demonstrate that it's not the case. And anytime that a person is living outside of a value that communally we hold, they always are trying to overcompensate in some way because the way that they're judged externally very much informs the way that they're judging themselves. And therefore, as a result of that, they need to do something to make sure that nobody would be looking at them in a negative way as a result of it.
So I guess that also answers my question from before of, with all these avoidance that I have of trying to stay away from, saying or going too deep into, halacha or hashkafa, the answer is that you don't have to. A person's value and values is very much a sense of his relationship with himself then.
And again,
because that competency is going to come from what I feel I can do.
And also, we take away the whole idea of what makes someone a good person. What gives you worthiness? What makes you have a sense that I am okay? And how much is a person able to hold on to that versus them constantly being in a mode of having to compare that they have to some external metric, and how well are they able to just be able to stay within themselves and have a level of appreciation of who and what they are, their level of goodness, their level of competency. And people who oftentimes are truly all of those things will never take the time or have opportunity to reflect on that because they're so preoccupied with everything else that's going on without being able to take stock and have that level of appreciation of who and what they are without it ever coming into a question of their becoming haughty. Just knowing what you are, knowing what your value is, having an appreciation for that, and then living with that understanding is going to impact the way that you approach things.
It's interesting. Anytime I've spoken about this, and I'm a little bit of overkill on these things. I love mindfulness, not necessarily the pop psychology mindfulness that they do, but I try telling, when I was teaching, I try telling my students all the time that, you're davening 3 times a day. You have an opportunity over there, during that time, it's just quiet without even davening, just during that time, if you scheduled yourself a little bit of mindfulness during that time, it would transform, a lot of, there's so much noise we have going on. It's so much,
People like the noise.
It's a very comfortable distraction.
People have a great deal of difficulty in general tolerating discomfort and distress. And that really, which is the underlying construct of anxiety, is the inability to tolerate discomfort and distress. And people become anxious about them having to contend with that. And oftentimes we find that people will be running from one thing to the next and engaging in whatever they possibly can to avoid even the potential of being uncomfortable and potential of having to actually internally reflect and have an honest assessment of who and what they are. I was in a telephone call last week, and the thing that struck me most was the fact that the person wasn't demonstrating any level of distress or discomfort. And I was there with other members, and I'm like, guys, you notice there was zero. I said if somebody would have gone through this and I would have had an experience, I would be demonstrating a level of it. So I think people also believe that having a level of discomfort and distress is threatening to them and also reflects poorly on them, that in some way they are lacking given the fact that they are experiencing discomfort and distress in that way. And in reality, contending with discomfort and distress is just a part of life. Life in of itself, anytime that there's going to be an expectation and demand, that is going to elicit a level of discomfort. And what people don't appreciate is that you can be okay even though you're uncomfortable. And you can learn to better tolerate that discomfort. And again, heading back to your perfectionist comment, when our only metric of success is perfectionism, and if it's not perfect, there otherwise I'm a failure, you're going to constantly be unable to really deal with it. So human beings are messy. We all like to present and project ourselves as these perfectly refined human beings who are able to deal with anything that potentially arises, being able to be fully content with whatever it is that we have. We're able to just contend with whatever challenge. We're able to just do that which is societally expected of us, instead of being able to embrace that, no, you're human. I got a call yesterday about a Bachar Shidduchim. The question was, he's obsessing too much. I questioned the person and said, you're making a life decision. Wouldn't it be only natural to be obsessing about the unknown when you're having to approach something with such little data and making such a significant decision? And we don't think about things like that. We think that we should be able to approach everything cool, calm, and collected, and any level of that's lacking reflects on us as being weak or unable to manage. And instead, what we find is the sooner we're able to actually embrace that, yes, you're entitled to be uncomfortable, but uncomfortable doesn't mean that you can't be. We don't have that same escalation in many of the anxieties because I don't have to be pushing it away. I can approach it. I can have that sense of confidence that if it is that something arises, I'll be able to deal with it, and it doesn't have to become a threat to my whole existence.
I remember I was in a training when I was much younger. I was in a training, and they had someone speak, and they were part of it was about their life story, but part of the speech was about their anxiety. It was the first time I ever heard anyone go outer body on anxiety and embody it in a separate thing from them and being like, it's just hanging out with me. Like, it could be the greatest day, the greatest moment, and it just sits there, and I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, that's the problem and the solution, in a sense, is realizing that anxiety is nothing to do with your actual problems in life or your actual worries in life. Those might exacerbate it. Those might, tickle it in order for it to start going crazy. But those are things that whatever level of response is appropriate and normal, you would be experienced with that level of response. So, and I do believe mindfulness does connect directly to that. And, anytime I do speak about this, people are always like, oh, what about a person who has cancer? Like, first of all, like, let's just deal with the general public first, and then you can bring in that person on the extreme of things. But the funny thing is, the guy asking the question is never the person who has cancer. The person who has cancer is usually giving the class on this, because every time I meet that person, and I've met plenty of them, either in wheelchairs, cancer, paraplegics, all sorts of things, they're usually the ones preaching this. They're usually the ones preaching this idea of happy with their lot. And there's a certain mindfulness to them where because they're forced into this situation, they look at it in a certain way.
Instead of fighting their reality, they're able to come to a point of understanding and of acceptance of it, whereas others are perpetually trying to dodge whatever reality it is that potentially can make them uncomfortable.
When we end, we always like to ask a question, and we've asked it to you already, so we'll just keep it specific. If there was one thing about either daily routine or anxiety, we can choose, that you would love for people to know.
Being uncomfortable doesn't mean you're not okay.
Love it. Perfect. Dr. Mandelman.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to doing it again.
Likewise.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for watching the episode. Here at Second Opinion, we're always trying to have you be the one who makes the second opinion. I hope today's episode allowed you the information and access to that information enough to be able to decide for yourself. If you like today's episode, if it spoke to you and you want to see more, we got more. You can access our podcast on anywhere, any platform where you get your podcast. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is, we're on there. Video, audio, you got it. Please remember to like and subscribe. And again, thank you guys for joining us.